Manifesto on Constitution for the Christian Democrat Party for a Consensus. From the time of St. Augustine, St. Alban, St. Columba, St. Patrick and other saints, people in our country have drawn inspiration from the person of Jesus Christ. Chiefly, it could be argued, because of the example he set of living a life of love. St. Augustine was sent to Canterbury in England by Pope St. Gregory in the year 597, which was when the influence of Jesus Christ in England really started to take hold. Here's what Pope Gregory said about love. What should the law of God be taken to mean, if not charity? By charity we learn inwardly how the commandments of life are to be put into practice. Concerning this law, the voice of truth has said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another." Concerning it, Paul says, "Love is the fulfilling of the law." Again he says, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." What can the law of Christ be more rightly understood to mean than charity? And we truly fulfill his law when, for the principle of love, we bear the burdens of our brothers and sisters. Paul rightly calculates the multiplicity of this same law in the words, "Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or arrogant. It does nothing wrong. It is not covetous. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right." Before stating its policies, the Christian Democrat Party for a Consensus would like to declare that it is open to people of all faiths and none. It contends that it is perfectly possible for people of many different religions, as well as people of no religion at all, to respect and draw inspiration from the person of Jesus Christ. For this reason, if the CDPC is able to attract any people to become its candidates to stand for either local government or parliament, it would like to invite those candidates to be known as, for example, Agnostic Democrat, Atheist Democrat, Buddhist Democrat, Christian Democrat, Hindu Democrat, Muslim Democrat, Jewish Democrat, Sikh Democrat, or some other religious Democrat, depending on either their religion or lack of religion. In other words, all those who not only draw some form of inspiration from the person of Jesus Christ, but also believe in democracy, are welcome to join or become candidates for the Christian Democrat Party for a Consensus, regardless of either their religion or lack of religion. So what are the policies of the Christian Democrat Party for a Consensus? It does not have many, indeed only three: an energy policy, an early years policy, and an electoral reform policy. With respect to all other policies that need to be enacted in this country, and to the very many parts of these three named policies which need to be filled in, it believes that it can help to catalyse a process of radical and deepening consensus among all existing political parties, in which what needs to be done in this country actually does get done. So to begin, energy. Sorry, slight hiccup there. So to begin, the first policy, energy. This is the longest policy, so apologies for its length. But the CDPC's energy policy starts with a question: would you cook with coal or oil in your kitchen? We suggest that your answer might be no, because it would stink the house out and make it filthy. Fair enough. We suggest that the following dialogue that might then ensue. Would you be happy then to cook with natural gas? Yes. Why? Because it doesn't stink the house out and make it filthy. It burns with a clean blue flame. Fair enough. Wouldn't it then be better to burn only natural gas in our cars and our power stations? Because then we wouldn't be stinking the planet out and making the planet filthy. Yes, if that were possible, but it isn't. It is at this point that the CDPC would venture to disagree with you. Conversion of coal and oil into natural gas and the burning of natural gas in cars and power stations are economically viable technologies already existing, shovel-ready now, possibly slightly more expensive in the short run, but not in the long run. The CDPC does not believe that stinking out the air we breathe with the sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, carbon oxides, hazardous organic pollutants, hazardous inorganic pollutants and particulates that we generate when we burn coal and oil directly, without first converting them into natural gas, is any longer an option. End of. Clean blue flames are fine. Dirty, smelly, yellow, smoky flames are not. They should be phased out and banned within 20 years. The CDPC's energy policy then parks the foregoing dialogue on natural gas for a moment and continues with a quote. If we're really serious about fairness and want the world's predicted 2050 population of 9 billion people all to enjoy an income comparable with EU citizens today, the economy would need to grow 6 times between now and 2050, with incomes growing at an average rate of 3.6% per year. And this scenario still hasn't factored in income growth in the developed nations. Imagine a scenario in which incomes everywhere are commensurate with a 2% increase per annum in the current EU average income. The global economy grows almost 15 times in this scenario. And with growth at 2% a year from 2050 to the end of the century, the economy in 2100 is 40 times the size of today's economy. The details of this above quote are a bit mind-boggling, but the message is clear. The world economy needs to be 40 times bigger in 2100 if everyone in the world is to have an equal chance. The power output of the world is now about 15,000 gigawatts, 1 gigawatt, billion watts. 40 times 15,000 is 600,000 gigawatts. By 2100 we should be doing things a lot more efficiently, so probably, maybe, 300,000 gigawatts would do. At this point, the CDPC resumes the previously parked natural gas dialogue and presents a vision. At the heart of the South Atlantic Ocean is the South Atlantic Gyre, a very large area enclosed by huge circular currents, which is at least 6 million square kilometres in extent, and which has very little algae, and so therefore very little fishing activity. Algae are photosynthesizers at the bottom of the food chain. Wherever in the ocean they are scarce, any creatures that are higher up in the food chain, like fish, cannot survive. Roughly central to this more than 6 million square kilometre area of circulating current enclosed algae poor ocean lie the UK dependencies of Ascension Island and St Helena, which, if not only the people who live in these islands but also the UK government were in agreement, could possibly form some small part in the vision that follows. So what is this vision? It is a vision in which at least 15 billion tonnes of natural gas get generated each year through the gasification and or hydromethanation and or hydrogasification and or hydrocracking and or anaerobic digestion of 22 billion tonnes dry weight of floating seaweed growing on 6 million square kilometres of the South Atlantic Gyre until such a time that we have more than enough natural gas to supply the needs in 2100 of a 40 times bigger 300,000 gigawatt consuming global economy. Clearly, such an enormous 2100 global economy would have to be fully circular in the sense that it was managing to propel all of its biological and technical nutrients along separate fully closed circular paths, so that very little mining of virgin materials was necessary. Incidentally, something similar to this growth of floating seaweed, but on a smaller scale, happens naturally in the North Atlantic Gyre, where huge floating mats of sargassum seaweed act like sorts of inverted coral reefs where baby fish and turtles can grow and develop. For this reason, the North Atlantic Gyre is often referred to as the Sargassum Sea. But how could such a large annual production of floating seaweed be possible? Here's how. The atmosphere needs about 2,400 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's to stop us freezing. It's because carbon dioxide acts as like a blanket. That's what the atmosphere has had for the last hundreds of thousands of years. It's around about that level, 2,400 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So the atmosphere needs about 2,400 billion tons of carbon dioxide. But the atmosphere's got about 3,200 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's 800 billion tons of feedstock just waiting to be turned into natural gas. Here's two simple calculations to show how. Calculation 1. 800 billion tons of carbon dioxide is 16/44 times 800 billion tons of CH4, which is natural gas. That's because CH4, methane, natural gas, molecular weight of 16, CO2, molecular weight of 44, so the fraction is 16/44. So 800 billion tons CO2 corresponds to 300 billion tons of natural gas. But how could you convert 800 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into 300 billion tons of natural gas in 20 years? Here's how. Calculation 2. 10 grams floating seaweed per square metre per day, which is a reasonable, according to the literature, productivity for seaweed. 10 grams floating seaweed per square metre per day is approximately 5 grams carbon per square metre per day. Half the weight of algae is carbon, which is 1,825 grams of carbon per square metre per year. 5 times 365 equals 1825, which is 0.0011825 tons of carbon. Tons of carbon per square metre per year. 1 ton is 1 million grams. Converting 800 billion tons of CO2 in 20 years means converting 40 billion tons of CO2 in 1 year. 40 billion tons CO2 per year is 12/44 times 40 billion tons of carbon per year, which is about 11 billion tons carbon per year. So 11 billion tons carbon per year divided by 10 grams floating seaweed per square metre per day, which equals 11 billion divided by that previous figure of 0.001825, which corresponds to 6 million square metres needed to convert that much carbon dioxide, 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide in 1 year into natural gas. So 6 million square metres, and that corresponds to 6 million square kilometres. 1 square kilometre is 1 million square metres. So 6 million square kilometres of ocean would be needed to grow enough floating seaweed to convert that 800 billion tons of redundant CO2 feedstock in the atmosphere, which we're trying to get rid of anyway, into 300 billion tons of natural gas. How could you do that? You do it with 240,000 simple ship-hauled 100-metre wide floating seaweed collectors. quick picture. The collectors would haul out the seaweed from the sea surface onto the perforated draining deck of this ship, from where the oxygen-rich seawater in which the seaweed is immersed would drain into the ship's hold. The ship would trace out a full 25 square kilometre area in the course of a day, collecting 25 square kilometres worth of seaweed at a rate of 10 grams dry weight seaweed per square metre. The oxygen-rich seawater would drain out through pipes at the bottom of the ship's hold at a depth in the ocean of about 5 metres, whatever. This might help to alleviate the ocean's growing dead zone problem. Dead zone meaning lack of oxygen. The algae are photosynthesizers. They convert carbon dioxide, water and sunlight into biomass, algae, and into their own biomass and oxygen. So they suck in carbon dioxide, breathe out oxygen. The seaweed cargo of each collector ship would then, at the end of each of its 25 square kilometre trawls, be delivered into dry anaerobic digesters housed on old oil tankers or other old ships, placed every 25 square kilometres. A picture. No, up here. Not very clear, sorry. Yes, so the seaweed cargo of each collector ship would then, at the end of each of its 25 square kilometre trawls, be delivered into dry anaerobic digesters housed on old oil tankers or other old ships, placed every 25 square kilometres. The 100-metre algae collectors towed by the collector ships would also bubble out as needed. The recycled nutrients from the digested algae, which continuously return from the digesters as digestate, so that the algal growth is consistently maintained. Why 240,000 collector ships? Because each collector ship serves 25 square kilometres of sea surface, so 240,000 times 25 equals 6 million square kilometres, which is what you need. But is 10 grams dry weight of floating seaweed per square metre per day really feasible on the open ocean? Well, yes, according to what are called the Redfield ratios, so long as you provide a big enough pulse of initial nitrogen and phosphorus nutrients, N and P. The thing is, once the digestate starts to return from the digesters after 2 weeks or so, the initial pulse of nitrogen and phosphorus will get continuously recycled and will not need to be replaced except to make up for some small amount of wastage. The Redfield ratios of 106 carbon to 16 nitrogen to 1 phosphorus are based on the following photosynthesis respiration equation for algae. 106 CO2 plus 122 H2O plus 16 HNO3 plus 1 H3PO4 gets photosynthesized into CH2O in brackets 106, NH3 in brackets 16, H3PO, that is the algae, plus 138 O2, that's the oxygen. Because the atomic weights of carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus are 12, 14 and 31 respectively, this means that 106 times 12, which is 1272 grams of carbon, is produced for every 16 times 14, which is 224 grams of nitrogen, and every 1 times 31, which is 31 grams of phosphorus. So the weight ratios are thus 1272 grams of carbon to 224 grams of nitrogen to 31 grams of phosphorus, or approximately 5.7 to 1 for carbon to nitrogen and 41 to 1 for carbon to phosphorus. So to consume the first 2-week quota of 420 million tonnes of carbon from the atmosphere, 6 million square kilometres at 5 grams carbon per square metre per day for 14 days corresponds to 420 million tonnes. That's where that came from. To consume the first 2-week quota of 422 million tonnes carbon from the atmosphere would require approximately 420 divided by 5.7, which is roughly 74 million tonnes of nitrogen, and 420 divided by 41, which is approximately 10 million tonnes of phosphorus. This is roughly half the annual world supply of nitrogen and all the annual world supply of phosphorus. This calculation is based on the Redfield ratios for microalgae, which means very small algae. Floating seaweeds are actually macroalgae, i.e. large algae. They have CNP ratios of 550 to 30 to 1, which are better ratios. These revised ratios give an annual nitrogen requirement of 27 million tonnes, which is 18% of annual world supply, 1/8, and an annual phosphorus requirement of 2 million tonnes, which is about 20% of annual world supply. So, seaweed doesn't need as much nitrogen as phosphorus as the very small algae. But, question, how would a 40 times bigger, 300,000 gigawatt consuming global economy operate? Answer: by consuming all of its natural gas in a fully circular fashion. The most simple way to do this would be as follows. In each square kilometre of the central 6 million square kilometres of the South Atlantic Gyre, place one floating 5 megawatt wind turbine with 100 wave energy converters, each rated at 1 megawatt, strung between each set of 4 wind turbines, so that each wave energy converter is separated from each of its nearest 4 neighbours by a bit less than 100 metres. Each of the wind turbines would be fitted with simple satellite controlled guidance engines so that they could be kept in stable locations with respect to each other. The massive grand scale circulating currents of the South Atlantic Gyre would turn the whole system slowly round, but that wouldn't matter. I mean, it's as long as they stay stable with respect to each other, that's fine. So it's a minor adjustment that would maintain the movement. It would maintain them in a reasonably stable configuration. Right, taking into account the fact that such a connected army of wind and wave energy farms, WWEFs, do not work at full capacity all the time, the capacity factors of wind turbines and wave energy collectors are 40% and 30% respectively. The power generated by this renewable energy system would average out at about 300,000 gigawatts throughout the year. Each 25, there's based on a MIT study that was done on this, not, they don't claim the whole area, but they claimed it on on the basis of one of these big farms. But if you just put lots of them together, you should be able to scale it up. Each 25 square kilometre of this interconnected WWEF system would power a ship-housed seawater electrolysis facility that would produce enough hydrogen to convert all the liquefied carbon dioxide returning in tankers from all the world's natural gas-fired carbon capture fitted power stations back into natural gas. The renewable energy powered wind turbine wave energy collectors, they electrolyze water from the renewable energy and produce hydrogen. The power stations burning natural gas and producing carbon dioxide, that is collected and brought back and reacted with the hydrogen in what's called the Sabatier process, and that produces methane and water. So it is perfectly feasible to recycle the methane with this huge electrolysis, renewably powered electrolysis facility. So as I say, you're converting the each 25 square kilometre plot of this interconnected WWEF system would power a ship-housed seawater electrolysis facility that would produce enough hydrogen to convert all the liquefied CO2 returning in tankers from all the world's natural gas-fired carbon capture fitted power stations back into natural gas. This recycled natural gas would make its way back to the world's power stations again, accompanied by tankers which can also containing all the oxygen that was generated by the electrolyzers at the same time as the hydrogen. The electrolyzers split the seawater into hydrogen and oxygen. You liquefy the oxygen, bung it into tankers, and that goes back, and you're also liquefying the methane, and that goes back. So as I say, both the natural gas and oxygen would be liquefied for efficient transport. In this way, each power station will always be burning its natural gas in the cleanest, most efficient way possible, using pure oxygen instead of air. Such so-called oxy-fuel gas-fired power stations produce very pure streams of CO2 and steam, from which it is very easy to capture the CO2 and recycle the water and heat. But how would all this infrastructure be paid for? By levying not a 0.05% transaction tax on all stock exchange financial transactions, the so-called Tobin tax, but rather a 5% required purchase of natural gas currency, RPNGC. What does that mean? I'll explain. Such required purchases of natural gas would be enabled by putting a floor price on natural gas, so that it becomes not a commodity priced in dollars, euros or pounds or yen or whatever, but rather a fundamental unit of exchange, a currency. In this way, our present currencies would be priced in kilograms of natural gas, not the other way round. It is not dollars, euros and pounds that power the global economy. It is kilograms of natural gas that power the global economy. Cars, trucks, trains, planes, ships and power stations cannot be run on rectangles of paper, but they can be run on kilograms of natural gas. In this new system, investors in the stock exchanges of the world enable the building up of infrastructure that pays back to them in short order fast accumulating personal reserves of natural gas currency. They are not being taxed, they are being rewarded with accumulating capital stocks of natural gas, which has become the fundamental currency that runs the global economy and which cannot therefore be downgraded or junked. It has a floor price. To achieve all the above, the CDPC believes that a new financial instrument should be introduced, called a per-person infrastructure for growth bond, PPIGB. The word infrastructure in this title does not refer just to physical infrastructure, but to all forms of infrastructure required for a person's growth, prosperity and flourishing, including those forms of infrastructure required to provide that person with health, education, social, law and order, defence and other services. The word infrastructure also refers to a person's minimum required income. In order to bring a PPIGB, per person infrastructure for growth bond, into existence, a calculation is made that each person of working or retirement age requires X pounds or dollars or euros or whatever worth of annual income and Y pounds worth of this new fully inclusive form of annual infrastructure that to maintain this person's growth, prosperity and flourishing, and therefore also the global economy's growth, prosperity and flourishing. Growth in the global economy is founded on each of its 6 billion people of working or retirement age having the means to pay for services that the economy provides. Poor personal income and poor personal services, poor personal income and poor personal infrastructure mean poor growth in the economy. We said before that in the new system of floor price natural gas currency set out in the manifesto above, in that system, investors in the stock exchanges of the world enable the building up of infrastructure that pays back to them in short order fast accumulating personal reserves of this natural gas currency. But what we are suggesting is that the infrastructure that these investors are paying for comes in the form of these per person infrastructure for growth bonds, PPIGBs, which build up each person's capacity to grow, prosper and flourish. What these investors are getting for all this per person infrastructure building is personal reserves of natural gas, which has become the fundamental currency that runs the global economy and which cannot therefore be downgraded or junked. Here are some figures that show how this system might work. We set the X figure above for minimum personal annual income at £25,000. We set the Y figure above for the fully inclusive form of personal annual infrastructure at £20,000. So you add those two together, 25,000 plus 20,000 makes £40,000 per person. We set the floor price of natural gas at 50 pence per kilogram. A kilogram of natural gas in energy terms is actually a little bit better than a litre of diesel or a litre of petrol. So, that's not an unreasonable figure. So as we say, the calculation for 2100, the end of this century, goes as follows. 6 billion people of working or retirement age times the £40,000 PPIG, the £40,000 per person infrastructure for growth bond. 6 billion people of working or retirement age times £40,000 equals £270 trillion. So that's what the investors pay for. That's what they buy. That's what they put out. Now, what they get back. 300 trillion kilograms of natural gas per 20 years. Remember, before we said that you get from converting the seaweed, sucking the carbon dioxide out of the air, converting into seaweed, digesting it into natural gas. We said 300 billion tonnes per 20 years. Up to 2100 you get 3 20-year periods, a bit more, so 3 times 300, let's call it about 1,000 billion tonnes of natural gas from the digestion of all that seaweed, the conversion of the CO2 feedstock in the atmosphere into natural gas. That comes to 1,000 trillion kilograms of natural gas, 50p per kilogram. That's 500 trillion pounds by 2100. The current reserves of oil, coal and gas converted into 1,000 trillion kilograms of natural gas, that also corresponds to 500 trillion pounds by 2100. Just a note there, that's reasonably accepted figure. It's been estimated 2,795 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide would be released if all the current proven reserves of coal, oil and gas were burned. Now, 2,795 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide, if you do 16/44 times that corresponds to 1,000 billion tonnes of natural gas, which is 1,000 trillion kilograms of natural gas. So, all the investors in all the stock exchanges of the world would have paid for 270 trillion pounds worth of per person infrastructure for growth bonds, and would hold 1,000 trillion pounds worth of natural gas currency, which, and this is important, in the fully circular economy envisaged in the manifesto above, would be circulated, not expended, and so would remain continuously in existence. In so doing, these investors would have not only carried out a pretty lucrative exchange for themselves, but would have also enabled a 40 times bigger, fully circular global economy to come into existence and flourish by 2100. So they've paid for each year. If you take it at, if you look at by, obviously it's a build-up thing, but if you look at 2100, they have accumulated stocks of 1,000 trillion pounds worth of natural gas. Now that isn't like burned and goes away. That goes, like we're saying, that is circulated, not expended. So they have those stocks. They own those stocks. That makes the economy function. It is the currency of the economy. So just imagine in 2100, they have stocks. That is what they own. 1,000 trillion pounds worth of natural gas currency. And they get that is in their coffers each year. It is not expended, and each year they are paying for 270 trillion pounds worth of per person infrastructure for growth bonds. So it is, if you imagine by 2100, it is a lucrative exchange. There is enough assets, enough assets there, 1,000 trillion pounds worth of natural gas, which circulates and remains in existence, is not expended, to cover all that expenditure. And that's not taking into account any sort of assets of buildings, steel, everything. There's loads of other stuff, but just simply in terms of the basic natural gas currency. Right. So that's it. Now there's on the energy. There's just a little bit left on the energy. As I said, the energy is the really long policy here. Apologies for that, but we're getting there. The other two policies are very short, so I'll just finish this off. Right. The CDPC also believes that a new system of agriculture and waste conversion should be put in place in this country. The capital and operating costs and income streams of this new system are as follows. Capital and operating costs. 1. Construction of liquid biomethane, that's basically natural gas but produced by like digesting seaweed or digesting waste, or it's organically produced, but it's essentially the same as natural gas. Construction of liquid biomethane and anaerobic digestion and or gasification infrastructure. 2, 0.5 kilowatt, maybe currently you get about 0.3 kilowatt solar panels. Let's say 0.5 kilowatt roughly of solar panels in average annual power terms and one rain grey water harvest system per household. 3 loft cavity wall external wall insulation for each household that requires them. 4 dormer window loft conversions for each household that requires them. 5 conversion of back alleys, pavements, backhand front gardens, dormer roofs into generators of fruit, nuts, herbs, salad crops, vegetables, fish, edible oils, vinegar, wine, cider and other stuff, whatever. 6 construction of a sufficiently extensive nationwide network of large below ground rain and stormwater storage caverns which would provide a sufficiently deep sink for not only all accumulating surface water but also all rising rivers and lakes to drain into via underground pipes. Such a system would not only eradicate flooding but also very efficiently store much larger quantities of water than are stored at present. 7. Compost toilets for each household. Now, this is a functioning technology. It does exist, and the CDPC believes that the current system, where you get really nice clean water, you spend billions of pounds getting really nice clean water, then you pour feces and urine into that really nice clean water and totally contaminate it, and then spend more billions of pounds trying to clean that contaminated water up into slightly less contaminated water that you can then pour into rivers and lakes and sea and cause problems. That's not the best system. That it is surely a better system. Compost toilets, something like it, whether it's compost toilets or not. But the CDPC strongly believes there's a better system. 8. Construction of light chimney lit water cleaning and biomass generating loft duckweed ponds for each household. Now that and then a system of urine diversion to loft duckweed ponds for each household. So it's like duckweed can, that all that urine surely can act as fertilizer to grow duckweed. It converts it into biomass, and you can then turn that into energy or whatever. It's established technology. With what the CDPC is suggesting is get that nationwide, global somehow. Construction of pipe pump system to interconnect rainwater and grey water harvest, the large rain and stormwater storage caverns and the loft duckweed ponds. 11. Provision of slightly adapted collection vehicles which transport the bags containing the compost toilet contents to conversion to liquid biomethane and fertiliser facilities. 12. Conversion of the sewer system into a transport network that takes all non-fecal organic waste and all non-organic waste from all sources, whether they be municipal, commercial or industrial, to reuse, remanufacturing, recycling and conversion to liquid biomethane and fertiliser facilities. The sewer system thus becomes the largest listed building on the planet. Apologies for the weak joke. 13. Subdivision of current crop areas into smaller square crop areas, digging of duckweed drainage ditches between these square crop areas and planting of fruit and nut trees in the spaces between larger groups of these duckweed growing drainage water surrounded square crop areas, all arable land. I'll explain this more in a moment. Laying of drainage ditches beneath above mentioned square crop areas, feeding into duckweed drainage ditches, all arable land. Nationwide weed and duckweed harvesting for liquid biomethane and fertiliser income, all arable land. Installation of drainage pipe storage caverns transport water ditch network connecting the duckweed drainage ditches to sewer transport system, all arable land. Those are also obviously huge operating and capital costs. Here is the income streams. You pay out and you're getting back. So income streams. 17. Production of fruits, nuts, herbs, salad crops, vegetables, fish, edible oils, vinegar, wine, cider and other stuff in household gardens, household dormer roofs, communal areas, whatever. Obviously you pay to get the system put in place, but you get produce back, you sell them, whatever. 18. Large quantities of highly valuable liquid biomethane, like natural gas. And just small details here. Duckweed is highly productive. It's 10 grams carbon per square metre per day. It's actually even higher than we were saying about the seaweed, although seaweed can be very high. I mean, there have been cases where it's got to 30 grams carbon per square metre per day. But anyway, right, so duckweed is highly productive, 10 grams carbon per square metre per day. If you used 25% of the arable land, which is 25% of 50,000 square kilometres, which is about 10,000 square kilometres, for duckweed growing drainage ditches, you could generate 1 trillion cubic feet of biomethane, which is almost identical to natural gas, per year, as well as very large quantities of biofertilizer. Because all the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, it's called NPK, fertilizer, is now draining into the duckweed drainage ditches and not draining off into rivers, lakes, the sea, because it's draining and being consumed by the duckweed, all nitrogen vulnerable zone restrictions could be lifted so that much more fertilizer could be applied to arable land, resulting in higher yields, which would make up mostly for the loss of area to the duckweed drainage ditches. So what CDPC is suggesting is that you bung fertilizer on the land, it drains off and pollutes water, pollutes rivers, lakes, the sea. If you get a proper drainage system, sheets, porous, probably, but anyway, drainage sheets underneath, so the water hits the sheets, drains into the surrounding ditches, gets consumed by the duckweed. You're getting all that duckweed, which you can use, and you're not polluting water, and so you don't have to put restrictions about how much fertilizer you can use, because you can put more on, it's going to get consumed. It's with a proper drainage system, it'll be consumed by the duckweed. So that's what the CDPC is suggesting there. 19. Eradication of wastewater treatment costs. 20. Eradication of flood damage costs. With proper drainage system, with storm and rainwater, underground caverns, underground pipes. It's a lot of infrastructure, but put it in. You could eradicate flood damage costs. Eradication of landfill tax costs. It's a circular system. You're not pouring rubbish onto landfill. It's a circular system. Everything's being circulated. All landfill areas become usable income generating land again. All wastewater treatment areas become usable income generating land again. No more river and lake water extraction. The proper drainage system, you're collecting the water. You collect when it floods. It doesn't just destroy crops. It drains. You store it. You collect it. No more river and lake water extraction. No more over extraction of groundwater. The Colorado River in the US apparently doesn't even reach the sea now. The rivers in China, the Yangtze, doesn't reach the sea. So much is being taken out of it that you get rid of that. No more river and lake water extraction. No more over extraction of groundwater. Massively enhanced ecosystems and biodiversity nationwide. Massively enhanced air quality, resulting in sharply reduced healthcare costs. Like we said, sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides, carbon oxides, lead, cadmium, the inorganic pollutants, benzene, the organic pollutants, unburnt hydrocarbons, particulates, soot. That is a substantial health cost. Natural gas is clean. It burns cleanly. Why in our kitchen do we burn natural gas? No qualms at all. Nice clean blue flame. We don't burn coal or oil in the kitchen because it's dirty. So, sharply reduced healthcare costs, enhanced property values, reduced household utility bills, reduction in sewer and water main networks maintenance costs, reduced fertilizer costs, reduced herbicide and pesticide costs. You harvest the weeds, you don't destroy them. You harvest the weeds and convert them to liquid biomethane and fertilizer, and you bring about an increase of natural pest predator populations. So you're not killing off the predators that eat the insects. So you get increased pollination. You get an increased bee population. That's a problem. Bees are suffering. Bees are suffering. We need them. Increase of employment, decrease of unemployment, no more soil erosion, no more pollution of marine and freshwater environments, large increase in tourist income, Light Point, including income from sewer tours. I find the sewers fascinating. I mean, the amazing system built by the Victorians, but they're under stress. Convert them, do away with flushing. Turn them into a transport system. Where if you're getting compost toilets and urine diversion, you're not spending billions to get nice clean water, contaminating it, flushing it through the sewer, spending billions to make it slightly less contaminated, polluting the lakes. There's a better system, and so you could have tours through the sewers. Not compulsory, but anyway. Right, now that is finally it for energy. Apologies about its extreme length, but the rest is quite short. Now, just before we go to the final two of electoral reform and early years, all the policy areas I'm going to say now, the CDPC doesn't actually have any policies deliberately. It wants to be an agent of consensus, a radical, deepening consensus. These policy areas come from the listed departments of government now, just slightly rejigged. Some of them have been separated out, but you'll see this as I read it, and become new departments with a new cabinet minister. But anyway, I shall just say this now. Start off. Immigration, new department led by a new cabinet minister. Law and order, a new department led by a new cabinet minister. Defence, health, a new department led by a new cabinet minister. Education, social services, a new department led by a new cabinet minister. Work and pensions, business, innovation and skills, environment, food and rural affairs, communities and local government, culture, media and sport, international development, transport, foreign and commonwealth affairs, treasury, home, justice, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, EU, a new department led by a new cabinet minister dedicated to EU affairs. With respect to all the above policy areas, the CDPC will seek, with the possible help of occasional referenda, to catalyse a process of radical and deepening consensus among all existing political parties in which what needs to be done in this country actually does get done. The CDPC believes essentially the country needs consensus, a deep consensus, and it is up to politicians who profoundly disagree with each other to come together and reach a deep consensus. It is possible. And so, we're just about there now. Final two policy areas. Electoral reform. The CDPC proposes a new electoral system, which it calls FR 5-10-20, which stands for fractional representation with the 5-10-20 rule. The 5-10-20 rule, part of this system, means that if a party achieves less than 5% support nationwide in the currently applying general election, then it needs to exceed 20% support in an individual ward or constituency in order to break through in that particular ward or constituency. Whereas, if a party achieves more than 5% support nationwide in the currently applying general election, then it only needs to exceed 10% support in an individual ward or constituency in order to break through in that ward or constituency. The fractional representation part of this system means that any party candidate who, according to the above 5-10-20 rule, does manage to break through in an individual ward or constituency by exceeding either the 10% or the 20% support threshold as appropriate, will be rewarded with a fractional vote in the House of Commons or local council, which is exactly equal to the fraction of support that he or she, the candidate, achieved in the election. So, for example, in a constituency in which the three candidates who exceeded 10% support achieved 23%, for the sake of argument, 31% and 34% respectively in a general election, these candidates would be rewarded with fractional votes in the House of Commons throughout their 5-year term of office of not 1 but 0.23, 0.31 and 0.34 respectively. This system would have the following advantages. 1. Everything would be decided on election night. 2. Most voters would get something out of the election because their preferred candidate would in fact be representing them in Parliament. I mean, in the above example I just stated there, there are, for the sake of argument, 3 candidates standing. They've all exceeded the 20%, so even if one of them is less than 5% nationwide, no problem. They've broken through. They've all broken through. One's got 23%, one's got 31%, one's got 34%. They've all broken through. They all go to Parliament. One has 0.243 of a vote, one has 0.31 of a vote, one has 0.34 of a vote. They are all representing. Most people in that constituency will have voted for one of those candidates. Most voters would have got something out of that election because their preferred candidate would in fact be representing them in Parliament. 3. The percentage voting strength of each party in Parliament would exactly equal the percentage level of support it received in the country. That's what fractional votes allows. So, you know, you've got, they're all elected, but they have different fractional votes. So that their voting strength, not the number of MPs, but that party's voting strength exactly reflects the percentage of support it got in the country. 4. A far greater diversity of background and experience would exist among MPs who would also represent much more fairly not only all the ethnicities of this country, but also both its genders. The House of Commons would look like the country at large much more than it does as it stands. Mostly men, very few women, ethnic minorities very underrepresented. A possible disadvantage of this system would be that it could more than triple the number of serving MPs, unless the size of each constituency was made considerably larger. However, one could argue that increasing the number and diversity of our representatives would be an advantage, not a disadvantage. Anything that increases our engagement with the government of this country by increasing the say that everybody gets in who should represent them, as opposed to only allowing a say to those people who happen to reside in marginal constituencies, is surely a good thing, not a bad thing. Practical point, if you did triple the number of MPs, how could they all fit into the House of Commons? We can get around that, surely. The MP that has the highest fractional vote could take priority. You've got video spillovers. Most of the time that debating chamber is pretty empty. If you've got triple the number of MPs, it will probably mostly be full. We could get around that problem, I'm quite sure. And that's it. That's electoral reform. And finally, the final policy is early years. And before I just present this, I would like to point out that this is different from the other policy areas in the sense that what the CDPC is proposing is that everything here under early years is put before a free vote. There's no 3-line whips or anything. It's free vote, so it'd be perfectly possible for a person to be a candidate for, or to be represent the CDPC, or to vote for the CDPC, and to campaign against what's being suggested in this early years thing. That's not a problem. It's a free vote. Here we go. Early years. Children who are, for whatever reason, separated from their true biological mother and father feel a deep pain. These children, when faced with the reality that this separation is permanent, will yearn to be brought up by a new mother and a new father in a new family. This will soothe their pain and bring them the comfort of a mother and father's love and support, to replace the mother and father's love and support that they have lost. It is for this reason that the CDPC believes that all children who are separated permanently, for whatever reason, from their true biological mother and father, have the right to be adopted or fostered by a new mother and father, the possibility not being excluded here that their new mother and father do not live together. Lifelong, faithful, unconditional love is a wonderful thing, whether it be between a woman and a woman, a man and a man and a woman, a transgender person and a non-transgender person, or two transgender people. But, and this is not a policy just a plea for tolerance, lifelong, faithful, unconditional love does not depend on sex. If it did, it would be conditional love, not unconditional love. Children are nourished by all the above 5 forms of lifelong, faithful, unconditional love. But at heart we believe that this kind of deep love does not really divide into categories. In other words, we believe that whatever such deep love may look like from the outside, it is only ever itself. Love is one. When it comes to the very early years, we believe that we should put our money where our mouths are. We therefore believe that the following proposal, or something very much like it, should be considered. £10,000 should be offered by counsellors in all abortion centres, whether they be NHS or privately run, to all clients who come to these centres requesting an abortion. This money only being released to the client at the time of the baby's birth, it being reallocated to others if the client decides after all to have an abortion. The clients pay the same fee to the abortion centre, if such a fee is required, regardless of whether they have an abortion or not. This consensual approach to eradicating abortion could potentially achieve its aim if everyone gave £1 per week, because 200,000 abortion centre clients per year times £10,000 per client is £2 billion per year, and that is equivalent to 40 million adults giving £1 per week over 50 weeks. I think it was Bill Clinton who once said, former US president, who once said, abortion should be legal but rare. The CDPC is suggesting that with that support, £10,000 counselling, help, that with that support, perhaps we could pass legislation that would help to make abortion not just legal but rare, but legal but never. Legal but never, not legal but rare. It's an aspiration. Both of the above mentioned early years matters. Just one more point here. The pro-life and pro-choice people, I suggest, are actually completely united. Why? Because they both would rather abortion didn't happen. There is that unites, and so that's what we're suggesting, an aspiration that with this legislation in place, perhaps abortion could become legal but never, not just legal but rare. So both of the above mentioned early years matters would be put before Parliament on a free vote, but there would be a requirement for at least 2 bills and 2 referenda on both matters over the 5-year course of the Parliament. And that's it, and I apologise for the extreme length. I hope you're awake. Sorry. Okay, thanks very much.